The Speakers Bank Podcast. Our voices, our views. Hi, and welcome to another edition of the Speakers Bank Podcast. I'm here with Storm.
Hello.
How are you today?
Not bad.
It's good. And Catherine.
Hi.
And how are you?
I'm good, thank you.
That's good. And today we'll be discussing accessibility. So first, what we need to do, guys, is we need to define accessibility. The dictionary refers to it as the design of products, devices, services or environments for people who experience disabilities. It's also thought of as the concept of accessible design and practice of accessible development to ensure both direct access, i.e. unassisted, and indirect access, meaning compatibility with a person's assistive technology, for example, computer screen readers. So guys, how would you define accessibility?
Accessibility is everything. It doesn't matter if you're an able-bodied person or a disability person. If you've got no accessibility, you can't go out socialising, you can't go out and find a job, and you can't enjoy life. I know for my personal experiences, I like to watch movies and I like to go to the cinema. But if there's no accessibility for me to get to the cinema inside the complex, I can't go. And I was very, very lucky, and this is a positive experience, that they have a lift at the cinema where you can go from one level to the next level without any problem. Having said that, I've had also bad experiences when we've had buses who I need to go to TAFE and they're not available to have the disability buses to get me on to where I need to go. So it's a love and hate relationship.
So Catherine, what does accessibility mean to you?
It means so if people, so there's a few shops where I live where it's not wheelchair friendly. So I reckon shops need to have flat surface so they allow people with disability to go in the shops more.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So now that we've established what it means, we're now going to discuss each of these barriers, and we're also going to talk about our opinions and experiences in relation to this. So, for example, inadequate information and advice about how to enter the open workplace and obtain ongoing support is obviously a real issue. For example, there's no one-stop shop for people with disabilities looking for information, advice and ongoing support, or there seems to be a lack of coordination between different government services so that people with disabilities are unclear about which Commonwealth or state agencies can provide them with assistance. So, what do you guys think about all this?
I remember one example. Me and Mimi were going out to a function in Melbourne, in Rod Laver Arena, and they didn't specify where the lifts were, where the car parking was, or if there was going to be any stairs or any other barriers involved in it. They just said, please come to Rod Laver Arena, we're on this type of floor, and we'll see you there. There was no other specific information. And when we asked the staff people who were in charge of the event where are the lifts, they had no idea. So that's a really poor way of trying to get people with disabilities involved. You want them involved because it was part of the NDIS meeting, but how are you going to do that if it's not accessible enough for you to go? So me and Mimi got very lucky, because had it been for a wheelchair or a very severe person with special needs, I don't think he'd be able to get to that particular area.
And Catherine, what do you think about the barriers associated with people with disabilities?
I don't think there is much in the ways of access with disabilities, my concern.
Yeah. That's fine. So we're going to talk about financial cost of participation. For example, additional transport, support, and other costs associated with work, many of which are not subsidised, unfortunately. And it also foregoes the disability support, pension, and associated benefits, such as the pensioner's health care card.
For me, it's not so much knowing what the services are, it's about getting the services that you need. For example, when Catherine or I in the past have applied for a companion card, it was extremely difficult. We both had a classified disability, we both had a need for the companion card, but due to their strict criteria on a disability, on what they think a disability actually is, it's very, very hard. You have to write a letter to the doctor has to get a recommendation to write the letter to the companion card people, which is the government, to say that he has a disability. And then there's other barriers where the card comes in too late, or the card is not specifically what you wanted. I remember there's some places where the companion card isn't available in certain areas that you want to go to.
Yeah, because legally not all businesses have to accept the companion card.
Exactly.
Yeah, and I find that too. It's just hurdle after hurdle, and I think even as well as a supporting letter, the doctor actually has to fill in his own part of the form.
Right. Yeah, I
which is
forgot
another
about that.
part of
Yes,
paperwork.
yes.
And then you have to get photos and get them signed.
Yes.
It's almost like applying for a passport.
Oh, passport's another issue too. It was just amazing how much it goes in the passport.
Oh, it definitely is. And also, speaking of all that stuff, what do you guys think about inflexible work environments? For example, difficulties with physical access to the workplace and getting to and from work, or even inadequate adjustments and adaptations to workplace equipment, or even inflexible work hours?
I just don't think there's enough education by the employees to understand what a disability actually is. I don't think that they have in their mind that they want to recruit a person with a disability in the first place, even though they've got the qualification and they've got the right attributes to be in that job. That's probably part of the reason. The other reason is because the building itself isn't set up to be a disability-friendly environment. So before any workers, and I suggest any employers that want to employ someone with a disability, they have to get the right OH&S stuff out of the way, so then you can work at your best. At your best, you can work at your best.
Yep. And Catherine, what are your thoughts on this issue?
Well, from my experience, if you were to do further study, like outside school or something, like you're doing a diploma, if you were to go through, like I did my music, I did a diploma in music performance. Before, people need to think about so I'm growing up, I have a daughter that's very musical, but she has an intellectual learning disability. Is she able to participate in a course? And they say, yeah, no worries, bring her in and all that. So off I went. But what my advice to everybody out there, if you want to hire someone that has some kind of learning issue, you need to provide the help that they need. Otherwise,
they're going to fail.
They're going to fail and they're going to struggle, and it wouldn't be good for anybody. So I would,
Just one more thing I wanted to add to. The frustrating part about getting the work that you want is that there's a funding criteria for it, and once the funding criteria runs out, they don't want to hire you. So I'm hoping, fingers crossed, that with the NDIS, that won't be happening. So if the boss thinks that you're doing a good job, they don't have the luxury or the excuse to say, because your funding's run out, you can't continue on with this job.
Yeah.
Even though you like the job and you want to be in the job.
Because I think with most disability job providers, they'll actually have a period of, I think it's like 6 months, where they'll subsidise your wage so the company doesn't lose any money. But once that runs out, the employer is no longer obligated to keep you on.
Exactly, and I'm
which is pointless, because you just go around the same mountain again.
Exactly, and that's the reason why people with disabilities do not get jobs, because they don't want to go through that loop system where it's just going to end up back to square one again. So I'm hoping with the NDIS, with the amount of funding that we're getting, that encourages people to hire us without the need of worrying about the funding, because we're going to fund ourselves to get a job.
Yeah, and it's interesting that you mention that, because I once applied for a job with a major telecommunications provider, and they actually asked me on the form, you know, do you have a disability? If you do, you know, is there any modifications we can make to the office, you know, to try and help you? And this is a, I won't obviously disclose which one, but this is a very well known provider, and it's just fantastic to see that they actually are willing to even make those modifications to the office. Because unfortunately, there's more limited opportunities for people with disabilities. As I mentioned before, there's, you know, poor links in, you know, when it comes to the workplace, and even between state-administered school and post-school programs, as well as Commonwealth-administered disability employment services, or even underrepresentation in the vocational, educational, and training systems, as we'd even discussed a little bit in an earlier episode. There's even limited scope and even a lack of variety in jobs offered to people with disabilities, which I think is horrible. It gets worse. There's lower possibilities for promotion, and there's even lower paying jobs, lower retention rates, and there's even stigma and discrimination against people with disabilities.
That shouldn't be on.
So do you guys have anything you'd like to add to, you know, some of what I've just told you?
I just think that people who want to hire people with disabilities just need to do a bit of background work. They need to understand what a disability actually is, and don't just assume that an able-bodied person can work the same hours as a disability person, because that's not going to happen. But what I can guarantee you is that when you hire a person with a disability, they will work twice as hard, or if not harder, than any other able-bodied person in your roster.
Yeah, my people with a disability can work just as well as an able-bodied person. And they should have the right to get this, even if they're on a pension, that they're getting some money through the government. They can be paid casually on top of their pension at the right payments. So, like, if I could get work, if I was working at the cafe and I was getting good pay, if I was working in a scope or whatever, which I did, they're getting paid $2. And I just think that's wrong. That's like taking advantage of people with disabilities. Like, people out there we need more people with a disability out there working with with everybody.
So I suppose to clarify what you're saying is number one, we should have it so that we don't lose any money for any additional income we make, provided that it's under a certain amount. And I would say that what you're also trying to say is that we should be paid at award wages no matter what the job is.
Yes.
But one more thing I wanted to add to the conversation was, I don't want people to get the wrong idea that we live off the pension and that's all we need. We need more. We want to earn our money the correct way.
Yes.
We are not lazy people.
We're not lazy.
That's the stigma I want to come out to you guys and say that we want to work. We are ready to work. Just give us an opportunity and we'll prove it.
And the reality is, Storm, I don't know if you know this either, Catherine, the reality is, and I know I'm getting a bit biblical, the reality is we are created to work. We are designed with a capacity to work, and if we don't work, studies have actually shown that we get depressed, we can develop psychological problems, because the reality is we need meaning and purpose, because the reality is if there's no meaning, even if it's one we create on our own, the reality is people get really depressed and all sorts of horrible things happen as a result of that. So I thought that took a dark turn, but anyway,
That was correct.
Yeah, no, it was. I just thought I'd slot that in to lighten the mood. So can either of you guys think of some suggestions or initiatives that our local, state, or even federal government, or maybe even private institutions, can do or have done to make their physical premises more accessible for people with disabilities?
Well, I guess if you really want to go in depth, you could ask the person with a disability at your home, what are your needs? What do you actually need to provide a successful work environment for you? Because every person with a disability has different needs.
Yeah.
Some might be needing a bigger table because they don't have a long reach, or some people might need accessible toilets because they're not accessible. That kind of stuff.
Yeah. What about you, Catherine?
When I did my music diploma, the people that said yes, bring her in, they should have quizzed about my needs before I even started, so that so I could have a go at actually doing something I would enjoy. And that goes with anybody that wants to do something. People with disabilities wants to be out there like everybody else.
Exactly.
Because we're just people. But the needs need to go into consideration. The needs need to be supported.
And that's where the support workers need to be there. They need flexible work hours based on their disability as well.
And with that, and I hate to sound like Jerry Springer when I say this, it's time, I suppose, for our final thoughts on the subject, if any.
Final thoughts are, we're getting there. It's trying to get there, but more work needs to be done on securing the future of our jobs and our livelihood.
Yeah. It is getting better, and I reckon we could get more people like us out there working at the proper rate, like everybody.
Yeah. And one thing I'd like to add personally is, and this is just something that's come to mind, is that do you find that when you go to a job provider, that if you do get a potential employer, that the job provider actually scares them off with a whole stack of paperwork, and then they think they're going to be sued because you break a nail?
Yes.
Because that really does scare the employer.
I find, and I'm just going to mention this quickly, I find the disability discrimination is probably part of the problem as why people won't hire people with disabilities, because they're scared if they go and do this a little bit wrong, they'll get discriminated, which means they'll get sued.
Yeah. Well, I suppose my aspect is more, and I worry about from the employer perspective, is that if you make it really intimidating and you give someone a stack of forms and medical reports from doctors, the reality is, if I'm an employer, to be honest with you, Storm, I'm not going to want to hire you if I feel like I'm going to get sued, or if I feel that something's going to happen to you.
Because people don't want to take risks. They don't want to go with the big guy and say, if I take this guy on minimum wage, I'll be safe. But for me, if I was the boss, I'd be going high or go home. That type of thing. If they're qualified. If they're qualified.
What about you, Catherine? Any last thing to add, or are you good?
I think I'm good.
That's good. Well, with that brings us to the end of yet another episode of the Speakers Bank podcast. We've covered accessibility And now it's time, well, especially for me, to access the coffee and maybe a bed.
Yes, that'd be great.
Bye bye.
Take care, everyone. Bye.
See you.